Right.
എന്നേശുവേ എൻ ജീവൻ നീരല്ലോ, എന്നേശുവേ എൻ ബലൻ നീരല്ലോ, എന്നേശുവേ എൻ ജീവൻ നീരല്ലോ, എന്നേശുവേ എൻ ബലൻ നീരല്ലോ. സീയോനിൻ പാതയിൽ വെളിച്ചം നീരല്ലോ, ദേശം മുഖം കണ്ട് എങ്കും കളിപ്പേ.
Good evening to one and all, and I am John on behalf of Speaking Books English Forum, and we are in the 80th episode, and on behalf of Speaking Books English, we thank all our listeners and our viewers in Milgi TV and YouTube channels, and you have been with us in all this journey, and the purpose of our motive is fulfilled, I think so, because so many people who are not going through books, and this platform helps them a lot to learn through by presenting the book review. Many of them has got benefited. There's no doubt in it. So today we are in the 80th episode, and the book Rethink by BRO.SYLVANUS. The author is BRO.SYLVANUS, and Pastor David Leonard from Madurai, and we welcome him. Pastor, we welcome you on behalf of Speaking Books, and he is the youth pastor in the Lighthouse Church in Lighthouse AG Church in Madurai, and he has been with us for a long time, and he has previously he has presented a very good book, the name Not a Fan. So that is a very good book, and today also the title of this book, Rethink, there is something, I think there is something more stored in that book from the very title itself, because in these days we are having so many problems in churches, in the administration, and in the management of the church. But this book, I think it gives some perspective how a church should be the model, and that is the thing. And now Pastor David Leonard is going to present this book. We welcome you once again, Pastor, on behalf of Speaking Books.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Uncle John, Uncle, and the team for inviting me and having me part of this program once again. Let me dive directly into the book and the review of that book. I'll just summarize it. It's a very beautiful book, and this book I completed reading it this month, so it was really thought-provoking. It challenged me a lot, and it's not a very big book. It's a matter of 150 pages in total, but each and every page and each and every line was inspiring, and it made me to think how we should move forward as a church, as God's children, and how we need to rethink what we have once learned. So let me dive into it. The title of the book is Rethink. And the subtitle is 9 Paradigm Shifts for Activating the Church. 9 Paradigm Shifts for Activating the Church. And the author is BRO.SYLVANUS. He is the director of bivocational church planting for the North American Mission Board. He holds a doctorate in the area of missional ecclesiology. His doctoral thesis was on assisting existing congregations in transitioning in a missional direction. So he has sufficient knowledge and he knows what he's talking about. And from the content of the book, I'm 100% sure that he does know what the situation is and how we can move forward. So it was published by the Send Institute, and there are 10 to 11 chapters in it. I'll go chapter by chapter. And the first chapter, he talks about the need to rethink. So instead of jumping directly to the thinking about, you have to rethink these and stuff, he first goes to the topic of why. So he starts with a quote by Alvin Toffler. He says, "The illiterate of the 21st century will not be those who cannot read and write. The illiterate of the 21st century will not be those who cannot read and write, but those who cannot learn, unlearn, and relearn." So that's what Alvin Toffler said. And he goes on to say, why should be the question that we should ask before how. And there are two primary ways to influence human behavior. And the one thing is manipulation, the other one is inspiration. And he says change that is coming from manipulation is short lived, but a change that comes from inspiration is going to do a lot of change to this world. And if we have to be an inspirational, we have to bring in the inspirational change, we should ask the question of why, is what he is saying. And then he goes on to talk about two changes that every organization considers. And two things are, the first thing is organizational change, and the second thing is cultural change. So when we think of in a ministry perspective, and even in organizations, in business and all that, when we find a need, when we find a challenge, immediately what we think is we go and do organizational change. So he says organizational changes in the sense that he talks about new programs, new processes, new techniques, and all that. But what he's saying is cultural change comes from the way we rethink, the way we approach a problem. So he says if you are going to look at an organizational change, it's going to be short lived and it's tough. But there is no point in doing an organizational change if you are not going to focus on cultural change, asking the question of why and getting deeper into the conversation. He goes on to say we cannot settle with minor adjustments in our ecclesiology or how we do church. It's a beautiful book. I don't want to take much time in this topic, but I'll go ahead. And he says another way to frame the discussion is to use the language of paradigm. What is paradigm? It means perception, it means assumption, or a frame of reference. So every organization, including the church, is built upon underlying paradigms or assumptions. He's not talking about the Christian beliefs or the theological systems. He's not touching upon that. What he is saying is we have to think. A paradigm determines how an organization thinks and therefore acts. So he's not talking about theological foundations or Christian beliefs. He's not saying change those. He's saying the way you think, the way you approach a problem. So he's saying you have to have a paradigm shift in your thinking. Then he goes on to say a paradigm shift happens when there is a fundamental change in an underlying assumption. And he quotes three reasons why a genuine paradigm shift is necessary. The first thing is we have done church for a long time, and deeply we held assumptions, and this is how church should be, this is how mission should be, this is how leadership should be. But we have to have a paradigm shift in that. And the second thing he's talking about, cultural change is necessary. If the organizational change is not rooted in paradigm shift thinking, then there is no use in doing an organizational change. And the third thing he says is you have to understand why we do it. You have to know, engage in the key paradigm shifts. A beautiful quote that he quotes is we are perfectly designed to achieve what we are currently achieving. We are perfectly designed to achieve what we are currently achieving. But if we have to move ahead, what he means is if we have to move ahead, we should change our thinking. We should change our thinking. And this is what
We
this
don't
book is all
go
about.
through consultants.
So there are 9 paradigm shifts that he's talking. I'll rush through them. And the first paradigm shift that he's thinking is rethink the nature of the church. Rethink the nature of the church. Rethink the nature of the church. He quotes David Bosch's quote. He's saying, mission is not primarily an activity of the church, but an attribute of God. Mission is not primarily an activity of the church, but an attribute of God. He also quotes another person, Albert Curry, when he says, if mission defines who Christ is, and if Christ sent us and he has sent us, then mission defines who we are. So he's saying the nature of the church is mission oriented. Church shouldn't be an attractional base, come and enjoy. No, it's not attractional based. The church, nature of the church is being sent. Christ was sent, the Holy Spirit was sent. So he sends us into this world. So the nature of church is mission oriented. So he says the missionary nature of the church. And the second thing is the missionary, when it comes to the missionary nature of the church, he's saying rethink the nature of the church from church served to church sent. From being served, he's saying, be one who is sent, one who is sent. So that was a beautiful thing. He goes on to say, he says, when you talk about the attribute of God, we say God is love. No, he is holy, he is sovereign, he has wisdom, he has justice, he has love. But we never on that list say God is missional. Mission is an attribute of God and not an activity of the church. Not an activity of the church. We usually have this mission is a part of that church. That's how we think, right? The church has mission, but no, the right quote he says is mission, for mission God has the church. So the purpose of the church is for mission, is what he says. So from being church served, he's calling us to be a church that sends people. And the third chapter, he talks about rethink mission. The first thing was rethink the nature of the church. And the second thing is, second paradigm shift he talks about is rethink mission. Rethink mission. Sorry. The second paradigm shift is about moving from seeing mission as something that we do over there to something we do where we have already been sent. So mission is not about going to someplace else and doing something. He says mission is about doing where we have already been sent. It might be our place of work, it might be our mission field, it might be our the locality where our church is, where we pastor, where we are working in organizations, corporates, where we do business. So mission is not something that you do over there, but it is something what you do over where you are, where you have already been sent. And if God's central way of reaching his world was to incarnate himself in Jesus, then our way of reaching the world should be likewise incarnational. So we should exhibit Jesus. We should show Jesus wherever we are. And he goes on to say about Paul, where he says, follow me as I follow Christ. There are only two people in the entire Bible who said, follow me. And the one is Jesus, and the second one was Paul. Paul had that, tenacity. He had that confidence. He knows for sure that he is following Christ exactly how he should be followed. And he's saying, you can follow me. If you're finding it difficult to follow Jesus directly, follow me as I imitate Christ. So that is what being incarnational is about. So he says the second paradigm shift is from being excarnate mission to incarnate mission. So rethink mission from being excarnate mission to incarnate mission. And the third paradigm shift that Brad Briscoe talks about is rethink Missio Dei. Rethink Missio Dei. Missio Dei. The third key paradigm shift in missional theology deals with the concept of Missio Dei, an English term that means mission of God. Mission of God. So he's saying you should move from, as I said earlier, we should move from being a church with a mission to mission with a church. So our focus is not to do church, but our focus should be to do missions. Our focus should not be to have programs and events and gather people, but our program should be to send people into the world and evangelize. So he's saying, speaking of having the mission of God in us. So the shift that needs to take place focuses on understanding that the mission is not the invitation or program of the church. Instead, it flows directly from the character and purposes of God, missionary God. So he's saying, be a church instead of being a church with a mission, be a person or a church that has mission and the church empowers that mission. And the fourth paradigm shift that he talks about is rethink culture. Rethink culture. He's not talking about the worldly culture that we see. He's saying, we have pastors who say, the world is different now. we feel it different from what we when we started the ministry, because we have a culture, we have that culture, and we think this is how it should be, and we have not changed ourselves, adapted to the culture. And he's saying, when he talks about culture, he's saying, move from a place of privilege to a posture of a servant. So don't be in a state where people should serve me, people should come. No, be a servant. Be a servant. So rethink culture is what he's saying. The world has seemingly changed so quickly and radically that many churches feel like exile in a foreign land, and they don't completely understand the changes that have taken place, and they only know that things are not like they used to be. So there is a place of influence and significance, but we should not rest there. As Jesus, he took the posture of a servant and he washed the feet of his disciples. So rethinking culture, instead of having dominion, having dominating something, we should be in a servant attitude. We should have that servant attitude. So he's taking move from a place of privilege to a posture of a servant, a posture of a servant. And the fifth paradigm shift that he talks about is rethink vocation. Rethink vocation. That is something you know, I admire, and I think the world right now needs people to rethink vocation. Um, okay, he goes on to give an illustration where he says, take for a moment, for a couple of minutes, think about your day. He's saying, think about yesterday. What percentage of what you did yesterday was spiritual and what percentage was secular? Is what he's asking. So you did a lot of things yesterday, and what percentage of it was spiritual and what percentage of it were secular is what he's saying. So then he goes on to asking the question, follow-up question is, does selling insurance, running a coffee shop, driving Uber or Ola, you know, teaching in a public school or waiting tables at the local restaurant matter to God? He's asking that question. So when we, as God's children, we think vocation as something different from spiritual things. So we say those are secular and these are spiritual. And he says our spiritual life should be there in the place of work also. If you are selling insurance, if you're running a coffee shop, if you're doing business, it should also be a spiritual activity. So when I was thinking about this, reading this, one incident came to my mind where a person in the church, not exactly in our church, but we went to another church for wedding, and the wedding was highly spiritual program. Prayer was there, singing songs, God was being glorified, and then following that the reception took place, and there were cine songs blasting out loud on the loudspeakers. So what these people had in mind was spiritual is something that happens within the church, one day in a week, and the rest of the day it's secular. No, but as Christians we should spend more time. Every part of life should be a spiritual thing. So he's calling everyone to rethink their vocation. So he's calling them to move from secular vocation to sacred calling. So we talk about missionaries who came to India, William Carey and all that. They consider their vocation, the work that they do, as sacred callings. The sacred calling. So that's what he's saying. Rethink vocation, move from a secular vocation to sacred calling. And the sixth paradigm shift that Brad Briscoe talks about is rethink APEST. It's an abbreviation, APEST. What it stands for, Ephesians 4, verse 1 to 6, if we talk about the fivefold ministry: apostle, prophet, evangelist, shepherd, and teacher. So there is fivefold ministry, but most of the time the churches, all across the world, operates in twofold. There is pastor or shepherd and teacher. Pastor and teacher are alone there. So we need to rethink the APEST, the fivefold ministry. So there are apostles, I'm not denying that. There are prophets, there are evangelists, but they are outside the church. Once they get that gifting, they move outside the church. They do a different ministry. But he's saying, rethink APEST. The fivefold ministry should exist within the church. It should operate within the church. So that's what he's saying. Rethink, rethink, rethink APEST. Okay, and then he goes, he says, unfortunately, most churches have traditionally operated with only twofold out of the five. So most of the time, the church has not matured enough. The church hasn't grown enough because with just twofold, the impact, the intensity of growth, the maturity in the churches and the believers, it's not going to be full. So to be fully in God's mission, to engage fully in God's mission, to mature in Christ, we should have this fivefold ministry operating within the church. A church that can bring together, encourage, and capture the gifting of a fully functioning team will succeed in whatever it is seeking to achieve. So he's saying move from twofold to fivefold. So rethink APEST as moving from twofold to fivefold. And the seventh paradigm shift that Brad Briscoe talks about is rethink leadership. Rethink leadership. There is a more servant centered approach to leading that may go by the language of mutual, shared, and polycentric leadership, which not only provides a more biblical model of leadership but is necessary in a changing context. So, leadership should be shared, it should revolve around several leaders. One person cannot lead the entire group. We find that in the Bible Moses alone couldn't lead. So Jethro, he comes and he says you have to divide the people so that you could be more effective. You can go a long distance in your leadership. So we need to rethink leadership. So the posture of leadership is very important. It shouldn't be I am one man show, but it should be shared leadership. The beauty of shared polycentric leadership is that it includes a relational group of people who learn to distribute responsibility, engaging in both leading as well as following, and giving time to each other to be on a mission. So one person cannot do it all. So there should be a relational group of people who learn, who engage, and who follow, who give time and all that. And under that topic itself, he is talking about the priority of leadership. Priority of leadership. And when he talks about priority of leadership, he's talking about three things that should be a priority in the mind of a leader. And the first thing is correctly assessing reality. When the organization goes bigger and bigger, there is a problem of correctly analyzing reality. We might have a lot of assumption, but we need to correctly assess things, reality, so that we can make right decisions. So an adaptive mode of leadership will involve correctly assessing reality. And the second thing is he's saying creating a culture. Creating a culture. It's not dictatorship. It's not authoritative leadership. He's saying create a culture, a community where people engage, where people grow, where people enjoy the presence of leadership and God in that. And the third thing he's saying, activate all the people of God. Don't just select 4 or 5 people and say, you are the leaders, you control everything. No. Activate all the people of God. Last week, when I was reading a note that I wrote probably 7 or 8 years back, I was going through my papers and I wrote something, a line that I wrote 7 or 8 years back. It says, when you are doing youth ministry, you might not know. So it's like I wrote as if God said, He said, you might not know who will become a CEO or president, a businessman, who will become a teacher. So you equip them all, you train them all, is what I wrote. So don't be partial in developing leaders, train them all, activate them all. You never know who is going to become what in the years to come. So activate all the people of God. So he says, rethink leadership from equipping some to activating all. So this rethink paradigm shift is from equipping some to activating all. The eighth paradigm shift is rethink discipleship and evangelism. Rethink discipleship and evangelism. When the problem with our churches is we focus on evangelism the first, then we say after we evangelize over a period of time, then we will move on to discipleship. But God's way of rethinking, the way He did was He made disciples, then He evangelized with those disciples. So we need to focus on discipleship. We need to focus on discipleship. And once they are equipped and they powered enough, by the Holy Spirit, they will go and evangelize. So the first thing is God didn't say go and evangelize first, then make disciples. He said go make disciples. So that's what he's saying. Rethink discipleship and evangelism. So he's saying from evangelism, then discipleship, rethink to discipleship, then evangelism. So that is the eighth paradigm shift. I'm just rushing up so that we'll complete it on time. So the biblical model is for leaders to identify, equip, and mobilize gifted evangelists, inspire all believers to live questionable lives. By meaning of questionable life is living a life of curiosity. When people see you and I, they should be curious to know about us. So that is what disciples were doing. People came and saw disciples. John the Baptist, he lived a different life, and people came to see who he is. And Jesus didn't go and he was not talking a lot. He lived a life that made people curious and they followed him. The disciples were the same. So being first focused on discipleship, it's being separated out, living a different life, totally surrendered to Christ. And then that questionable life that will attract people, and there's a chance for evangelism to take place. So rethink discipleship and evangelism, which comes first, is what he's asking us to rethink. And the ninth paradigm shift that he talks about is rethink scorecards. Rethink scorecards. A quote from Seth Godin. He says, "Measurement is fabulous." A beautiful quote. Measurement is fabulous. Unless you are busy measuring what's easy to measure as opposed to what's important. Most of the time, what we measure is what's easy. The number of head count in the church, the money that comes within the church, and those are easy things to measure. But he's saying rethink scorecards. What is important? What is important? How many disciples do we have in our church? It's tough to measure, but that's what we should focus on. How many are actually saved? We need to focus on. People say I am saved, but no, their life is different. So he's
Please
saying
mute
you
your
measure
phone,
what's
sir. Mute your phone. I got extra noises. Please, I don't know who is going. Please mute your phone.
so he's saying don't measure what is easy, but measure what is important. Measure what is important. So most of the time we measure three things. One is the number of buildings or assets we have, the budgets that we have, and the number of people we have. But he's saying we should count the influence that the church has on community. Can we able to measure that? He says focus on that. Try measuring the impact that church has on the community. So these things he's saying you have to focus on. Counting is giving attention to numbers, but measuring is giving attention to change. Counting is giving attention to numbers. Measuring is giving attention to change. So instead of asking how many, you have to ask how far have we gone? How far have we taken the mission of God? How far have we gone in evangelism? How far have we increased ourselves in giving? So we should measure and not count. Measure and not count. So what he is asking to rethink is rethink scorecards from church activities to kingdom impact. So instead of measuring church activities, measure the kingdom impact. How far have you done an impact in the community that you are in? And the last chapter, he titles it Think Long Haul and Not Quick Fix. When an issue comes, immediately we try to quick fix it. But he's saying, think in a long haul, 5 years from now, 10 years from now. What kind of impact are you expecting from your church, from your ministry, from the business that you are doing, from in your personal life? How much of an impactful life that you are going to live? So he's saying, think long haul. When you're doing quick fixes, you're doing organizational changes. But what is needed for this period in time is we need cultural change within the church, within our families, in our individual lives. So this is the 9 paradigm shifts that Brad Briscoe talks about. It was a wonderful book, worth reading, and I would recommend every one of you to read it. It's I don't know. I have recommended this book to 10 or 15 people in the last 1 week alone. So it's a book worth reading, and I encourage every one of you to read it. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you a lot. In a different dimension, so far we have been listening to so many reviews presented by so many people regarding the church, the paradigms, and the perspective of church, the model, how it should be. So, in a different angle, the author, Briscoe, has given. So, it's very interesting, and also it has induced our, interest in trying to get the book and go through it. So, it is really a wonderful book, and I thank you, Pastor, for presenting a wonderful presentation about the review of this book, Rethink. We have to rethink everything. We should not be always be in the old stage. As things are going changing, everything is changing. So what our ancestors, they lived in a different style. Even the lifestyle has changed. And also, but we cannot change the word of God, but the way we have to approach, that's what this book is focusing. So I really it is a very blessed one. So it will be more blessing for the people who listen to this. And over to John Joseph, please, our co-host here. Carry on, please.
Thank you, Uncle. Thank you, Pastor, for this wonderful book. I think it is really giving a dimension of redefining the church, I believe, because all the points being covered has been entirely. It is not just on it; it is through it, through the church. The first thing you started with was really thing by Alvin Toffler, right? Uh, those who cannot learn, unlearn, and relearn. So that is really the right thing. He's going to be called as illiterate when he cannot get adjusted or accustomed to the change and everything. So to start with, that was a really thing. And I believe I got a couple of things which really caught in my eyes is the first thing is the nature of church. It is the mission is not an activity of the church, but it attributes to God. So and most of the churches it is wrongly understood what we do something good, because that is what happening with heathens as well. When they believe that they do something good to others, there is something like spiritual, because it always has a difference, good or secular or what, doing something which is the world appreciates, or the world could say that good. Not everything is going to be spiritual. Spirituality is different, because as you said, when God's attribute is given in any kind of work, even if you are mentoring someone, if you're molding someone, if you are doing a correction to someone with the attribute of God, that is going to be pleasing, or that is going to be the real mission of God. So with that first point itself, it has been a very good opening for this book. And also the couple of things I went along with rethink the occasion. As you said, whatever we do, we can do it spiritually. And when we grow spiritually a lot, our secular percentage will definitely go less, because we'll not have a heart to do it separately as a secular thing. It'll always be spiritual. You'll always have God in heart, and stating that what will please God, what God will be happy about doing something. So obviously, when we start a Christian or the a life after salvation, obviously the secularism or the whatever the good things we feel that or boosting ourselves we are doing good to something someone else, obviously it is going to go away or vanish or fade away, and God is going to be all around, and He's going to uh, be the center point of our duty and everything. Because in all things we do, we have to honor and give the praise to God. That is how it is. And rethink the leadership, that is also realized. And the eighth thing was very important. I really surprised to listen. Rethink discipleship and evangelism, because I always thought evangelism comes first. Then after thinking deep inside, then when we get into the reality of getting into that, we'll understand only the disciple can do evangelism in a better way, and they can take it to whatever extent they can. When that is the right thing, churches can have a think about it. And also measurement. That's to finally to the scoring part. It was really fabulous. It is really fabulous to measure because we are really counting what are the number of things you have done. What are the budgets spent for these good things, or what are the budgets, or what are the plans or activities that has been planned. The numbers have been really measured. Understand otherwise, what is the impact of the church? What is the impact of a soul when he is saved and he is going out of the church? What is his impact in his family, in his workplace, or in his surroundings? Are people seeing a new man in him? Are the people able to see there is a difference in his life? Because without the difference, as you rightly said, when there's no difference in his life, there is no point saying that someone is saved. So that is the right thing. What are we measuring really into it? The hearts, the soul. Has it been grateful to the God? Or how far it has been impacted with God? So that was a really nice thing to summarize with the score. And finally, the long call, not a quick fix. It's definitely very important right now with the churches because they're trying to put a band-aid over a part, and really they are not looking into a part to have an very safe or very good long-lasting measures to be taken. So overall, it's a really good thing that we can rethink about when we are mentoring. We are just helping with the elders in the churches and everything. Obviously all these points will be an added value for everyone. Every church needs to have this uh, thoughts to be provoked inside, and I will be appreciated like if everyone have an opportunity to have to read this book and this is implemented in churches. Definitely the churches will have an will be like they will be the blessed bride of God, obviously. Thank you, Pastor, for this wonderful book. Thank you, Uncle.
Thank you, Joseph. Thank you for your valuable points, and you have observed all those points what Pastor David has given. Really is wonderful, and we must rethink over it what we can do as youngsters because nowadays things are changing. So we have to bring those things inside our church. We have to give them teaching regarding what all we had learned from these books and from these presentations, so that there will be a revival in churches, what we expect. So it's a very nice thing, and thank you, Joseph. And Joseph, you can call our participants to give their comments.
Sure, sure. So may I call like Dr. Karnagaran Uncle for his reviews? Dr. Karnagaran is the director for FGF Ministries, and he's
MCF.
laboring in.
Thank you. Yes, Joseph. Thank you. Thank you very much. So the
Welcome
topic
you, Uncle.
itself. Yeah, are you able to hear me?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. Because last time I had a problem with my the card. Okay. Good. I'm so happy to listen to this one very nice book with very nice topic. Rethinking. Rethinking. Uh, yeah. Why this topic and what made this the author to write a book in this topic? I would like to know. Is there anything that author has mentioned anything about that? What made him to write this? Because our host John Sundarana said, "Word of God is unchanging." But I must say the message of God is unchanging. We should be very careful. The words may change according to the translation, according to the version. See, this is what's happening today in our Christian society. People are so rigid, so adamant, they don't change at all. They don't look for, it's a measurement. No, you mentioned about rethinking the measurement aspect of our church growth and our mission activity. It's very, very important. Where we failed because we went for numerical measurement, which is not at all spiritual. Numerical measurement is not at all spiritual. We should very understand it very much. But our people have utterly failed in that. They went for measuring how many baptism, no, how many church planting, that how many missionaries. See, all numerical. So this is a big challenge, and we need to do that. So yeah, that's one thing. Yeah, thank you, thank you. Very, very nice book. Very nice book. For where we get it, may I have some information about the publishers and some details about that. Very nice. Thank you, David Leonard. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you Uncle, for sharing your wonderful thoughts. As you said, like the message of God is always the same. The intention or the heart of the God is going to be the same, and He really wants us to draw us closer to Him. So that is what He always wants us, and He expects our obedience. So as you said, like the God's messages for man is going to be the same. Always He wanted us to be with Him. Thank you, Uncle. As you said, like that is it. Thank you for your comments. Now I'll have Sylvanus brother to share his thoughts about this space.
Thank you, Brother Joseph, and especially thank you, Pastor Leonard, for the wonderful book. As usual, uh, you took us through the book very well, and we are convinced to buy the book, and we want to read the book as well. So I thank you, John Uncle, for inviting us again. There are a few things that caught my attention that I'd like to say. One is the church's mission is to the church is to be sent. Church should not pull people to itself to attract. Unfortunately, today's church is like that. I was earlier once I was very proudly sharing about one of our churches. I told that in Bhopal, in our church, people are coming from 100 kilometers away. So I was very proudly sharing this with our uncle, David uncle, and then David uncle said, "Really? Why not you are sending people to that place?" I was proudly sharing that. Then my thoughts changed. Of course, we are supposed to send people in the hot sun when the weather is so cold. Also, people from 100 kilometers they come to the church. Why should not we send people to that particular place to help them grow spiritually? So from that time onwards, my thoughts changed. The same way when I was in this missionary training in IEM, uh, church should be uh, church should not attract people. It actually should go towards people. That is what the whole training was all about. So uh, one thing that the church should rethink these days is that particular thing. Another thing is the culture, as the book rightly, I mean, the author rightly said in the book, today's church is very much privilege oriented, and sometimes they claim privilege. Since I am the pastor, I am the leader of the church, I want these privileges, or else the pastor are provided so much of stardom. They it has become like that. Instead of influencing the crowd in the right way, being a servant, something like that. So that is also a very important topic that is mentioned in the book. Another one is uh, rethink vocation. Very true. Till I was, till I become a missionary, and there was a huge conflict within me since right now I am in a village where normal church activity or else missionary activities could not be done in a place like this. So whatever we are doing, we feel like we are not doing something spiritual. Then God, through various words and various people, they encourage, God encouraged us to understand what we are doing. Our very life is a mission work. So whatever we are doing, we are attracting people towards God. Whenever we do it with uh, with God in mind, or else doing it very sincerely, God is glorified, and we attract people towards God. So secular versus sacred is something that we need to rethink. And today's church should teach youngsters. I've seen people. I've seen what I've learned in the church earlier was, when you don't come to church and when you go to tuition center, you are not a spiritual boy or a girl. You are losing your spiritual thing. So you are giving importance to worldly things. That is what I have seen in the church earlier. But now I understand we need to rethink that. Church need to rethink that. Youth leaders need to rethink that. And
Sil-
another thing is,
Silva,
uh,
Silva,
yes,
that you lose passport to heaven. That's a problem.
yeah,
People threaten
that's
the
true.
church believers. If you don't do this, or if you do this, you don't go to heaven. That's a fear they are imbibing in the hearts of congregation.
And of course, when I was there in the church, I used to look down upon children who go to tuition center, who study very well, who take meticulous effort to excel in studies. I look down upon them because I am very spiritual in the church. Then only later I realized God honors their effort, not where they are actually. I spent a lot of time in the church. Many people tried to guide me, but I thought they are distracting me from spiritual things. Then later I realized it is wrong. It is wrong. So church sometimes exploits people's energy, especially youngsters. So church need to be very careful. I hope God will help them. And another thing is the leadership priority. Uh, we see leaders fail to. The one point I was so attracted to is activate all the people. The church, especially youth leaders, we are, since I also was a leader once in the church, see, it is easy to encourage youngsters, young people in the church who are uh, very, who are comfortable to our zone. Whenever we say something, we think something, those people who are thinking on our lines, we are very good at encouraging them, using them, whereas we fail to activate all the people. I realized the mistake when Brother Leonard was taking this idea from the book. Another one is church needs to influence community, which is very important. These days, church is going down in that percentage. We fail to influence the community. Sometimes I think when I was in Dindikal in the church, it was an AG church, of course, a very nice church. We do a lot of work. It's a nice church, but I always think, even when I was a boy, I always think why we are not appreciated, or else uh, we are not very comfortable with reaching the people next to our church. There is a small community next to our church. The neighbors, we would not talk to them. We would not look at them. We will go and serve some 15 kilometers away, but what happens to the people around us? The church, with all its sound, with all its music, and all its crowd coming from different places, why are we not able to reach the immediate neighbors? So that is one important thing that the book also tells us to rethink. Thank you, Pastor Leonard, for bringing our attention to this book. God bless you. Thank you, all the listeners, for patiently listening to my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Sylvanus. Thank you very much for the wonderful points you have given with some illustrations what you have experienced in your life. So it's really thought-provoking. And now I call upon Reverend Dr. J. Bhavani Rajan for his comments. And now he is in Canada, and he is so gracious to join us, and he has accepted my calling. And so, we welcome you, Bhavani Rajan. We welcome you. Thank you for your wonderful presence here, and really, it will be a blessing for us. And there is no need for an introduction to our Reverend Dr. Bhavani Rajan. He is well known in this platform. He has been with us in all these days. So thank you. Yeah, please, it's your time.
Thank you so much, Brother John Sundar, and I am so grateful to you that most of the time uh, you feel that my presence should be there in the group discussions, which I consider a great honor to me personally. It's not, uh, I'm not simply praising you before your face, but every time you genuinely are calling me, I'm grateful to you for that. And secondly, I would like to thank and appreciate Thambi David Leonard for his this book, choice of book and presentation. And he is always a person who chooses a book with the deep that can bring deep knowledge to the listeners. I have listened a couple of times his previous presentation in the same forum, and I appreciate and I also thank him for this wonderful presentation. I'm sorry I joined a little late. Of course, by the time I was joining, and because I was already in a meeting, the meeting is a special prayer meeting for from 30th today to first of June, for a good new government that should be formed in India, which will not discriminate people on the basis of religion, basis of caste, creed, and Nallarchi, Nallarasu. So a very burdened group of people called me. I was privileged to, and then we have reflected on so many uh, biblical passages. Not only biblical, this was not a political meeting, but we did not discuss on anybody, no, but generally discuss about how the blatant uh, trespassing of constitutional requirements and secular nature of this country. So I was in that meeting, and that's why I told Saint Brother John a note that I will be joining a little late. So that's why I was late. So thank you. But when I joined, I heard a few things talking from Monsieur Dai. Monsieur Dai is a very ancient, from the time the discussion started about missions, nearly for the 50 years back, and talking about Monsieur Dai is the mission of God. God is it's God's mission. So he started talking about rethinking, Monsieur Dai rethinking a vision, vocation, and secular to sacred, rethink leadership, rethink core cards, this kind of paradigm. I think 9 paradigm shifts for the activity. So these endings are really good, but inside, just like the Karnagaran was saying, that we must make distinction between the word of God and the message of God, in the sense, the concept that is behind. Something can be expressed in different words, but what we have to understand is the conceptual understanding. The depth of the spirituality lies not in the எழுத்துக்குள்ளும் ஆய்வு உயிர்ப்பிக்கும் வாசக ஞானத்தால் வருமோ சுகம். By reading the text, you cannot experience the divine. Taimanor, it says that Paul says, right, the letter kills, but the spirit gives you life. So he makes a distinction between the written word and the spirit of God. In that aspect, what Brother Karnagaran David said, I must personally, I agree with him, because problem we make in the Christian community is this is the thing. And this is also in any other religious group has the same problem. So in that aspect, this mission subject has been a topic of many centuries, right from 1900, as far as I know, when they thought how various missionaries in various countries failed effectively to bring people to Christian fold, whether it's, as he said, is numerical. Does it mean conversion into a Christian, or making of a person realizes spiritually the great gift of salvation that is offered through Jesus Christ, that transcends every religious external ceremonies? Between these two things, the scholars have discussed on different forums, and different denominational church denominations have been discussing, and therefore this subject is a perennial one. It will be the subject of discussion even for the future days also. In that way, although this is correct right now, I am in the. I briefly just looked into the Google and went through read about the author. I think he would have, Pastor Leonard would have talked about the author. I'm not sure. He would have definitely introduced. He says this is currently the director of bivocational church planting for the North American Mission Board. I'm right now in the North American Institute. Very sad. Nobody is there in the church. They don't know what to do. I know my son goes to a church nearby, Mennonite, Brethren Mennonite Church. Very good, biblically based, very good denomination. There is a church here nearby just from my house. I normally go to a Lutheran church here on the Sundays, and go to some Pentecostal, some independent church. People always call me. Once in a week, I go and preach there. One person somehow convinced by my the way I interpret the scriptures, he was happy, and therefore he always calls me. It's a very small church. The church has been here for 20 years. They do not have own building, and people are going away. Those who see in the church today, if you come here, is above 70 and 80. That's the sad state of in the North American situation. The same is going to be in the US, in the Europe. The other countries, North American countries, Latin American countries, Brazil, still they are good, and here Asian countries, Indonesia, Asian countries, and because of the Pentecostal charismatic movement worship, we are able to keep the attendance in the huge numbers. I go to a Lutheran church. The maximum attendance I see every Sunday is maximum 30 or 40, maximum 40, and those are above 75. I don't see anybody coming inside. So what is wrong in this context here? I go. There is a college here, Alcogain College. Sometimes I go. This time only I didn't go. Last 2 times when I was here, I was volunteer chaplain in the International Spiritual Center. All the youth have lost faith in the Christian scriptures. They have different questions. The problems are different. So what I'm trying to say is, I'm not critical of any of the. Already I have some thing. How far we will contextualize in this is important. Whether it is rethinking of Monsieur Dai in the context of Indian. So how we make use of the material that is being used in one context to our context relevantly will be the best to make use of this kind of good books that we come across. That is one guideline I think we should follow for us to. Otherwise, if you simply follow the same thing and teach it as a gospel from a book from a good author who's genuinely written, no doubt there is from his experiences, from researchers. The book writing here is not simply writing. They undertake a lot of research. They consult a lot of books. They go into different revisions and before it comes into the form of a book. Several hard work lies behind, hours of work, reading, taking notes, complying, and then talking with discussing with friends, refining, rewriting. All these things happen, and therefore any book we cannot easily dismiss. This is this and that. We cannot. We should not do that. But at the same time, this mission field. You know, in the 1940s, I think we must also do that. There is a rethinking group in India called, I think, David Karunahararan will know, Sanjaya, Chakare, and Bishop Appaswamy. These three group, they were thinking about rethinking group, Christian indigenous. First, indigenous convert Christianity, a South Indian Christian theologian, jurist, a radical thinker, and part of rethinking Christianity in India group, which worked for the Indianization of Christianity. On the one hand, this is does not worry about. See, they said the terms like discipleship, church planting. We should do away with those kind of terms used in this country. According to this, even Sanjaya Chakrai said that we should abandon the fact that Christ is the only savior. That's some kind of things I cannot remember exactly. Some very critical of the writings. So if we want to make the gospel relevant to our country, we should study. I think the book also in one part or other somewhere discussed about the cultures the author had taken, although I have not heard that. But somebody, I think Sylvanus made a reference to that. Sylvanus or co-host made a reference to that. So therefore, the most of our missionary training centers are designed and based on modules and models based on even evangelism based on European Western methods. Even our Christian theological colleges, leave alone the Bible colleges, so many Bible colleges, they're so old, except a few theological colleges, seminaries, TTS or UTC. SIAX is different. Their model, although they say they are spiritual, they are not modern, they are not radical like the Sarambur. Their model is based on, again, from the West. We give very least consideration to our spiritual need of this country. So we can the sacred to secular to sacred. Yes, that is a good topic. How do we apply it in the rethink leadership? Yes, that is true. We should. How do we do it here? What way different from the leadership there and leadership here? This is a very peculiar country, Indian country. Vocation is a very good word. Pastors are not employers. When you are a pastor is not above the shoulders of the congregation. And the group thinking, I think brother mentioned about it. Group thinking, a group, a team, a spiritual team. That should be for that only. That team is the leader of the church, but not the single man, me, because I am charismatic, because I have the ability, I have the charisma to speak. I am very rhetoric in my speech. How do I do? Many of our people copy the Western people in the rhetoric and their style. When I was in the in the colleges and all, I exactly copied how Brother Dinagaran was speaking. I was influenced by his way of talk, his think. Some other time later, that it has got limitations. It has no value among the Hindus. It has some value among the Hindus when it comes to the receiving miracles and getting away from all those things. Not altogether it was wrong. So most of the thinkers in the recent, like for example, dialogues, they have made a dialogue centers. We have a dialogue center, one of the best in Tamil Nadu, I think. Their concepts are completely taken from the West, even today. I have more good friends are there, their directors are there. But Thiruvi Kalyana Sundaranar, given in a Saivite meeting, I recently read about it, gave a speech which angered the Orthodox Saivite Hindu scholars. I cannot call them Hindus, but they're Saivite scholars, because he compared the truth in Saivism from the teachings of Upper Swamigal, from the teachings of Upper. So this man is a pioneer in dialogue. We should take ideas from him. Vivekananda was a pioneer in Indian dialogue. We should take ideas from him. That works in this soil. that works in this country. Otherwise, we become irrelevant to that. I am not saying that we should do away with all the big any thought. Anninulin avarodal. Wherever you find the truth, even if it is found in an alien book, we should take it. That's what the scholars, Saivite scholars say. Even an alien book. The other prophets, Radhakrishna writes that we are not dismissing the nobility and the sacredness and the truth of the other prophets, which means the prophets of Christianity in Hindu and others. He has their own prophets. So they are mature. That level of understanding is prevailing in this country from lowest to highest. For example, recently, Taras Shyam was saying that what happens in Orissa and Jharkhand is that Vanavasi, forest dwellers, they are not Adivasigal, according to him. They are forest dwellers, Vanavasigal. அங்க போய் இவன் என்ன பண்றான்? What he does, he says that imposing the Hindutva identity to Vanavasis, which they rejected. அவனு இந்து தான். But his way of worship, his way of they are kind of earlier animistic worshipping kind of religion. Animism is there. Animistic religious worship. So what I'm saying, I'm not criticizing the book or I'm not criticizing, but what I'm saying is this book, this kind of, should also direct us towards that there are many good points in that towards us to think in our own way. So whatever we learn from the Western scholars, Western good evangelists and pastors, we are grateful to God for them, for such committed people. How best we should make use of it to internalize into our thing, in our situation, and make use of that. In that way, the message remains the same. The concept remains the same. The terms, we should be very careful. That's what I'm saying. Secondly, one thing I did not understand, and anyway, I could have still. What is first evangelizing and then discipleship and evangelizing? I have a little confusion. Maybe he had explained earlier, or I have not followed. I have that confusion still to. There are two things like first go into the world and preach the word of God, and some people say first preach and then disciple and then tell the gospel. So those distinction, I have some confusion. What really the author means, according to this author, what does he mean? If Brother Leonard could explain to me, I will be very happy. So those are the few thoughts I thought I should share with you. My concern always had been this, nothing more. But everything is valid because any religious work that is done by many great scholars. If we do not have this Bible, if the early church has not preserved it, now we may have many versions of it. We may not have the idea of what is Trinity. We may not know how this is the concept of the atonement. Everything was given by the Western people, the Roman Catholic Church, and later on the medieval church, and then the Reformation and the Reformers. We are grateful to them. And there are many people. But what is happening in the North Indian context? So this kind of, they did not help them to bring. If it cannot help them to bring there, how can it will help us in our context? So we need to be, while we are thankful and grateful and appreciate such good workers, men of God, who are moved by the Spirit of God. And we should also seek the help of the Spirit of God to make it relevant to our context. So that I tell it as my suggestion, not even my advice, my suggestion. That will help, I think, us to make the best use of writings of authors like David, Brad Brisco. I think with this, I would like to conclude my feedback. Once again, I thank Brother John Sundar, and I appreciate very much Pastor David Leonard for his wonderful presentation, choosing the right book, and his commitment and depth of knowledge all the time exhibits when he's making these presentations. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your points. You are always very frank and very transparent in exposing your thoughts. So really, I think Pastor David Leonard will give some answers for the questions you raised. And now it's Jayapal Balka. Are you there, Pastor? Are you there? Jayapal Balka, are you there? Okay. I just to conclude, before conclusion, I just want to point out some of the things what attracted me most, what which is not been, I mean, nowadays following in the churches, that fivefold ministry, what we read in Ephesians chapter 4, verse 13. So that fivefold ministry is not nowadays seen in our churches. And sometime back, I presented a review of a book by name The Principles of the Leadership by Dr. Alexander Kurian. He
Yeah,
was
leadership.
Alexander. He was telling about the New Testament. Totally, the church should follow the New Testament rules, and what are the things told there. He has got the leadership, dual leadership in churches. But here, what our broad BRISCO has expressed, that there are only two folds: pastor and shepherd teachers. But according to my knowledge, I can understand that this kind of twofold ministry is seen only in India. I think so, because when we have many of the foreigners who came before this regime, when they came for deliverance ministry or for gospel ministry, they have been apostles, and they have been holding some other ministry, as told in Ephesians chapter 4:13, and they have been encouraged by the church. For instance, Reinhard Bonke, he was doing deliverance ministry, and I don't remember another man from he's a godly man from Canada. He was also sent by his church for doing ministry in India. Those people, they always belong to a church, but this thing does not happen in India. I think you may agree with me. When they become a prophet, he goes away from the church and he's doing ministry on his own. When he says that he has got some deliverance ministry, apostle, he goes away from the church and he's doing some other ministry of his own. So such things will happen, and the author is very bold enough in Rethink, the book by BRO.SYLVANUS. He has told that. And one more point I want to finish with that, regarding reaching the scorecards. The measurement is fabulous, what he's telling. So don't counting the numbers, but measure what is happening. It reminds me of a verse in Revelation chapter 11, verse 1, where he is saying that measure the temple of God, altar with its worshippers. Measure the temple of the God with the altar and its worshippers. So, but don't. It also, that verse closes. Don't measure don't measure it the outer court, because it is for the Gentiles. So we cannot go for the Gentiles because just they are coming in. But whereas we, as believers or ministers or whatever thing we are having in the sight of God, whatever the position we are holding in the church or in any other organization, that we have to be measured. So I think it's a very good point given by the author, Briscoe. And so I think it's a really a very good work, and in so many aspects and so many dimensions, how a church should be as a model in these days. So it is really I thank once again Pastor David Leonard for his presentation, and really every time he presents a very nice book, as Reverend Dr. Bhavan Rajan told. Thank you. And now it's Pastor David Leonard's time for just to, if you want to tell something more and want to answer some of the questions raised by the participants, you can do it. Pastor, please.
Thank you. Thank you. And I don't know what questions were raised, but I remember few, two alone. One is uh, Dr. Bhavani Rajan. He said about discipleship and evangelism. So he said he didn't get clarity on it. The author he talks about, he's saying which comes first. It's more like in Tamil India we talk no, we egg comes first or the chicken comes first. It's kind of that kind of a question. But what he is saying is before we evangelize, being a disciple is more important. So it's not just about words that we preach the gospel, it's about the life that we live. So the focus of the church should not be to not focus on what we say, but about how we live. So he says, first focus on discipleship, and disciples will go automatically. They don't need to be compelled, they don't need to be trained and all that. It becomes their nature to go and evangelize. So he says, focus on discipleship within the church, is what he's saying. And Uncle John, Uncle talked about twofold in India. That's true. It's twofold in India. At the same time, from the looks of it, from what the author says, he's from US, so he too feels that even there, twofold ministry, it's what happening. Maybe people are there, but as we said, once they get the gifting, they are part of that church, but they move out, they come to the other country. They said, we are apostles, we are prophets. So in our Indian context, they move from one state to other, one city to the other. But maybe in US, it's from one country to the other. So it differs. I don't know how the author has experienced it. And concluding, I'm just wrapping up what it says. Again, I'm reiterating that quote. We are perfectly designed to achieve what we are currently achieving, is what he says. We are perfectly designed to achieve what we are currently achieving. Why? Because our thinking has been, formed to achieve what we have right now. But if we have to move forward, and he asked post two questions. Are we satisfied with what we are currently achieving? Is the question that he's asking. So if we would ask that question to ourselves, are we satisfied with what we are currently achieving? The answer would be no. So if there is a no, if no is the answer, the strategies and techniques that fit previous eras of church history, they don't seem to fit any longer. So we need to have new set of tools, new approaches, a new vision of reality, a new paradigm shift to move forward. And finally, he quotes from the Bible verse, Isaiah 43, verse 18 to 19. He says, forget the former things. Do not dwell on the past. See, I am doing a new thing. Now it springs up. Do you not perceive it? So God is doing a new thing, and it is our time to have a paradigm shift in our way we think, rethink, and do the mission that God has given us. Thank you, everyone. God bless you all.
Joseph, you can conclude, Joseph.
Yes. Thank you for your final comments, and thank you for your answers you have provided, Pastor David. Uh, thank you, everyone who has participated. Thank you, host John Uncle. Thank you, Dr. David Karnagaran Uncle. Thank you, Bhavani Rajan Uncle. Thank you, Sylvanus Brother, and thank you, Jayapal Balke Pastor. Thank you all, the viewers and everyone. And with this, we come to the end of this 80th session, and we'll all meet up in the next session, the 81st session. So until then, goodbye from the team. Thank you.
Thank you. Good night. Thank you.
Right. Thank you. Praise the Lord. Praise the Lord. Thank you, Pastor. Thank you, Aya. Thank you. Thank you, Sylvanus. Joseph, thank you.
Thank you, Uncle. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.